Try again. So what does Eusebius inherit? By the time Eusebius comes to write his panegyric, his victory of church, he's inherited a relatively recent set of ideas. The recent set of ideas he inherits comes from Julius Africanus' list, which for the first time puts Peter as a bishop at Rome during Claudius, and his alleged sidekick Mark as a bishop at Alexandria during Claudius. Never mind, history doesn't agree with those two things, okay, or the Bible for that matter. I mean, the Bible was still being written at that time. That's the 40s AD, okay. Caligula was put out of power, killed, in 41 AD. Claudius is then found by the Praetorian Guard hiding behind a curtain, and they acclaim him. And then he stays in the power until about 54 AD. Paul didn't even start writing his letters until about 44, 49 AD. Okay. So how could Peter, who was in Antioch and Samaria, be in Rome when Claudius had banned Christians and Jews from Rome? Oh, but that didn't matter to Julius Africanus, and it certainly didn't matter to the guy, feeding him the information, who was in Alexandria named Demetrius. They had to try to assert a primacy of Rome in order to oust Origen, who Demetrius was trying to get rid of. That's a long story between him and Origen. I'm not going to get into that. Nevertheless, Julius Africanus, who was going between, I'm not sure of the chronology here, between Alexandria and Rome, Demetrius was feeding him the information for the bishop list of Alexandria and Rome. And that's how Peter ends up getting on the list. Paul gets bumped off the list during Claudius, when there was no Roman church at that time. So all of a sudden, you got Africanus with his list from Demetrius to oust Origen. And then you got Hippolytus, who's at Rome, who's enjoying the attention of, remember this is 215, 222, and then there's another segment between 222 and 235 AD. That's Hippolytus at Rome getting the ear of Julia Mamaea, and of course Origen had gotten her ear too. So they are given by Africanus, directly or indirectly, I'm not sure, this list that they can then use to assert the greatness of Christianity to the imperial family, with Rome being suddenly placed first, because after all, the imperial family is in Rome. That's the first thing that Eusebius inherits, the list. There's more to the story than this, but I'm trying to keep it simple. Alright? The second thing that Eusebius inherits comes due to a battle going on in Rome, a two-sided battle. First of all, you had this business with, as I had already said, this apocalyptic expectation. And I showed you how at least some of the people there in Rome might have gotten that from Paul in Ephesians 1, 9 and 10. Alright, 1:9 in particular. In the very end of 1:9. Proetetum. That was a 7-year period. Tribulation quality. Okay. That's one side of the battle that this bishop list would help to undo or forestall or quell. And the argument being made via the list was, hi, Christ isn't due to come back for another almost 300 years. And meanwhile, these are the authorities over you instead. In other words, Christ coming back would be competition. Hey, what can I tell you? The second aspect of this battle going on in Rome was that there was this guy Callistus, and there's actually the tale of two Hippolytuses here that kind of complicates the story. You got a Hippolytus who's writing against Callistus, and this other Hippolytus who writes his own bishop list that's based on Africanus, who's pro-Callistus. So Callistus is on the second Hippolytus' list, but the first Hippolytus, who writes Refutation of All Heresies, is against this Callistus. So this bishop list helps to keep Callistus in Rome as the head of Rome. Okay, but during that battle over Callistus, suddenly there's a new term employed: Catholic Church. Callistus was claiming to be the Catholic Church, and he was agitating for recognition as such with the other churches outside Rome, and some of them agreed with him. But this first Hippolytus, who wrote Refutation of All Heresies, was saying that his church, because he was also a bishop at Rome, he was saying his church, not Callistus, was the Catholic Church. So our second Hippolytus, who did know Origin, I don't know about the first one, it's really a convoluted story there. He sides with Callistus. The Catholic Church, in either event, is born. That's the second thing Eusebius inherits. The term Catholic Church, the Latin equivalent of that, Latin and Greek. Kathar is the Greek word. Katharizo is the verb, and it's used in 1 John 9. It means purify, pure. Katharas means pure. That's where Catholic comes from, the term. So, Eusebius inherits the list, okay, which is based on this Jewishness garbage, which is based on just someone flat arbitrarily putting certain names on the list and saying they represent the true faith versus the heretics. And therefore there's no second advent coming imminently, going against Scripture, of course, in both cases. The second thing he inherits is the Catholic Church idea with Rome as the head, which newly starts during the severance in order to impress the severance, because they're in Rome. They like the idea of Rome being the head of everything. So if you got a Roman imperial family, you got to have a Roman imperial church. Got it? The third thing that Eusebius inherits is that there is this second Hippolytus, the guy who knows Origin. He makes his own list based on Africanus to a certain extent. In scholastic circles, it's called the Liber Gerontonis. I'm not pronouncing it exactly right. It's commonly known as the Chronicle. So Eusebius writes his own chronicle based on that one. But the second Hippolytus, if there's really a second, that's what Bishop lists by Robert Lee Williams is positing. There were two Hippolytuses. Okay, well, that's the third thing that Eusebius inherits, is this updated bishop list that goes through 234. Again, commonly called in scholastic circles Liber Gerontonis. I'm probably not saying it right. And they call it one, because there are two of them. The second one goes to 334. Obviously, that's something to do with Eusebius, building on the first one. Okay, so that's the third thing he inherits, and the list he inherits has Callistus on it. And then after him, Urbanus, and after him, Pontanius. Pontanius is the guy that our second Hippolytus sides with. Okay, and because he sides with him, when Severus Alexander is killed by Maximine in 235 BC, AD rather, our second Hippolytus and Pontanius are punished because of their closeness to that Severan imperial family. Pontanius is killed, and Hippolytus is exiled, which is how come we got that Liber Gerontionis first list, because after he's exiled, he writes it. You with me on that? Now this third list that Eusebius inherits in order to do his own Liber Gerontionis, his own chronicle, this third list, the fourth list that he inherits, makes a chronicle, a listing that begins with the Jewish high priests and basically equates the so-called Roman bishops with the Jerusalem high priest in this alleged unbroken succession, which there really was a broken succession. But they ignore that. The point is they're equating the Roman bishops with the Jewish high priests in the Old Testament. Now, you'll have to read chapters 8 and 9 of Robert Lee Williams' book to see this story in more detail. I can't possibly, convey it all in the video. But you see the point? He inherits a list based on a false idea of Jewish succession, starting with James, from Hegesippus. That morphs into Irenaeus, morphs again into Julius Africanus, morphs again into second Hippolytus' list. So Eusebius inherits a list that he uses that way. The second thing he inherits is, like I said, this claim that gradually morphs into, from initially Jewish succession, into a claim of the Catholic Church owing to a political battle that was going on in Rome at the time Hippolytus and Africanus were compiling their lists. Hippolytus getting his from Africanus, and maybe partly from Irenaeus, but it's all, they're all copying from each other. And then the third thing is this idea of Jewish high priest. That was not, that's new. But it buttresses the Rome primacy thing that is born during the Africanus Hippolytus list, which suddenly and for the first time puts Peter at Rome during Claudius and Mark at Alexandria during Claudius, which is a historical impossibility. So now we got the high priest idea. So now suddenly these Roman Catholics, new term, are inheriting the office of primacy like the high priest of Israel. The new Israel, got it? Right, yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to say what I gotta say. Eusebius writes this panegyric about church. Panegyric is a Roman and Greek style of, it can be applied to writing, it's generally speaking a speech, where you are ordered to cover certain topics in a way that pleases the emperor. And if you want to say anything snide, you gotta be real careful how you do it, or you can get your throat cut. Ostensibly, a panegyric is designed to praise. Okay? That's why it's so ironic that the very time that Eusebius is going to be writing this, as you're going to see in a Constantine, is the very time that God picks to say the church goes into the toilet finally. There are 2 times when it goes into the toilet. The worst 2 times. Tribulation quality. First is just after Alexander Severus, just before Alexander Severus is murdered, 231 to 238. That's what we've been talking about with the Hippolytus thing. And the second time is when Constantine comes to power, 301 to 308. Paul reserves his meter as 7s in both those places, which tells you it's as bad as it can get, clean house, end of story. So the so-called martyrdoms were really God cleaning house. And he had to clean house because in both situations, church is going to Caesar instead of to God. And that's what a panegyric is designed to do, is to appeal to Caesar. And the panegyric that Eusebius is writing is designed to appeal to the political pagan world, church triumphant. Of course, now he's writing it after Constantine has come to power. So, I mean, it's got that please the Caesar, make Caesar look good. He's the deliverer, you know. All that is happening during the 7s. Okay, or as a result of the 7s. Alright? So, what is Eusebius? A liar. Catering to Caesar rather than to God. Exaggerating. Outright lies and exaggerations, he tells. Writ large. And if it were just a drama where you are expecting it to be exaggerated, as was the style of those days, that would be fine. You know, in reality, if you got caught being a Christian, the magistrate just slapped your hand and you went home. But of course, in Eusebius' story, it's going to have to be cutting off a finger or a whole hand or even your neck, because he's writing an epic story. Deus ex machina, God comes down at the end, through in hoc signo bimbo. Same argument that Constantine made only 2 years ago, claiming Apollo gave him the sign. Wait till I get to that. Deus ex machina, Constantine our delivery comes down. Okay, all that stuff is Greco-Roman style, fine. It's exaggerated, he's lying. Okay. But that's not the style of the Bible. That's not the style of God. So, what kind of succession are we looking at?